Insider Gaming has learned from their sources that Skull and Bones is targeting a February 16th release date of 2024. I can't say precisely why I think this for various reasons, but I've spoken to people who would probably know whether this is likely to move or budge. And I think it's very, very likely that this ends up sticking as the release date. I don't think this gets bumped again. So I would be shocked if it misses this date, frankly. So I'm fully expecting it to make this date and to release on time. It's surprised us plenty, Skull and Bones, but they apparently are pretty confident. It's being priced at $50. They're also releasing a $15 to $20 premium edition upgrade, which will give extra like cosmetics, probably XP boosts and stuff. We'll see how it does. I think that there's people who play like Sea of Thieves that will probably try this and probably have a good time with it. I think there is an audience, but as for whether that audience is like enough to financially justify this, that's a big question mark. At this point, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on Skull and Bones, and they just need to get it out. I know that they really want to turn a profit on it. I just don't know how they can overcome the negative publicity. Like, it's possible with some games to overcome negative publicity and to explode, but usually there was an initial level of hype and then it crashed and then they recovered. You know what we got to do. But like, if we look at this, No Man's Sky, I'll write it like a human. No Man's Sky. Okay. No Man's Sky, crazy high level of hype. And then the game, maybe it's even growing. So like as it gets closer to launch, hype is growing. People are so excited for it. They love the idea of it. And then the game comes out and it plummets. People are like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is so much worse than we expected. And then interest in the game is really low, but then they start adding stuff to it and it starts to recover. And all of a sudden, maybe hype isn't quite as high as it was, but it's still very high. Like they recovered in the case of Cyberpunk. So like, you know, again, CP 2077, very similar thing. You know, it starts kind of low, hype gets really high as it gets closer to launch, and then it plummets. And some people are still like, oh, I just accidentally right clicked, which deletes it. Maybe it didn't plummet quite as bad as No Man's Sky because there was still a really good RPG in there, but they fixed it. And, you know, maybe the 1.6 update brings it up here, and then the 2.0 update shoots it up here, and then the 2.1 update brings it up a little more. So it recovers after cratering, right? But with Skull and Bones, it's a different story. So if we do Skull and Bones, I think it's much more like this. I think the interest has never really been that high. And now they're hoping, I mean, it's even bottomed out as time has gone on and it's not gotten anywhere near release. And now they're hoping that the game is just so good, they launch it and it shoots up and is really, really successful. I don't see that happening because this is just recovering for these others. This was just recovering the interest that was already there, showing, look, the game is as good as you were hoping it was going to be, or is at least close to it. But in the case of Skull and Bones, like, you're talking about a game that nobody really has been that pumped for to begin with. And that's the same struggle that like Suicide Squad has been dealing with, where maybe more because it's Rocksteady and it's DC. Maybe the interest level is like here, but it's never been that high. And after the play test, maybe it goes up, maybe it goes down. Who knows? I don't know what their pre-order numbers are like. But their same hope is that the game comes out and it shoots up and is super popular all of a sudden. And I just can't think of many games that have gone from zero interest to exploding, except maybe like the extremely rare example of like Valheim or maybe like Stardew Valley. But usually they're like indie games. They're games that explode because nobody's heard of them, not because people heard of them and dismissed them and then tried to come back. Can you guys in chat think of any games that have exploded in popularity that were known about before and just ended up being way better than anybody expected. Maybe Baldur's Gate, but I would argue Baldur's Gate, I still think like Baldur's Gate was in early access and was known by fans of that genre for years before it came out. And then it came out and it hit mainstream. But I would still say hype and interest was like this. But then again, I mean, I guess you could also say that Baldur's Gate 3 is like a game once in a generation in terms of quality and scope. So I guess I think you could probably say Baldur's Gate 3 fits this description. But like, do you think Suicide Squad or Skull and Bones has a Baldur's Gate 3 level of success? Like, I'm talking about a game like Suicide Squad or Skull and Bones that everybody has heard of, everybody knows about. It's a known quantity. People have dismissed it because they don't think they want it. And then the game comes out and is great, and everybody then converts. I don't know if there's many examples of games like that. Because Lies of P, I think, again, the more people heard about it, the more interested they were. People were interested in that from the start. Fortnite is an example of a game that I think that just exploded. Like, I think that's just, again, a once in a generation thing. And most people hadn't dismissed it. Maybe some people did, but most people, once they tried it, they're like, oh, this is great. Elden Ring, still the level of hype. Elden Ring was always super hyped, and then it lived up to the expectations. So I don't think even Elden Ring would fit. Return on Minecraft. No, Minecraft's always been huge. Guardians of the Galaxy. But even Guardians of the Galaxy, if we do like Guardians of the Galaxy, I think like hype was never that high because people thought it was just going to be Avengers again. And then it came out and it just didn't really go anywhere. And then like word of mouth has traveled and it's done a little better, but they've already said that it was a huge financial disappointment. So it by no means exploded like what they're hoping for. So I don't think even Guardians of the Galaxy would count. You know what is actually a good example? It hasn't come out yet, so who knows? This might not actually have a happy ending. X-Defiant. That's a game that everybody was like, this is a joke. It's Tom Clancy, X-Defiant. Like, what are you even talking about, Ubisoft? And they got made fun of so hard that they had to basically indefinitely delay it and forget about it. And then when it came back and they gave it to like COD pros and streamers, they actually liked it so much. They're like, this could actually, I would switch from Call of Duty to this. So I think you could say that. If we just do Starfield, I think very similarly, levels of hype were just insane, even though hype makes you stupid. Most of the people in here knew that Starfield was probably not going to be the second coming of Todd Howard, but I think it came out and it was a slower burn. Like, I think for some people, it dropped off a little sharper, but for a lot of the fans, it's been a slow process dropping down. And now you see hardcore Starfield and Bethesda fans that are like, nope, the game just isn't very good. And that's the thing on those Steam reviews where it's like 90 hours, 150 hours played, and they're not recommending the game. So I think it's taken them a much longer time to accept that it didn't live up to the hype. But now it's floating around here. Maybe with an expansion, they can recover some. But for Starfield, I think the level of changes required are so vast, I don't see it happening. I'd love to be wrong because a lot of people, and I probably even said this back in 2020, I didn't expect them to fix Cyberpunk the way that they have. I know they said like, yeah, we'll work on it. We'll get it to where it's supposed to be. It took 3 years, but they did it. I'll give them credit for that. They did it. So maybe they're able to do it with Starfield, but I would personally expect them to just make incremental changes, maybe some improvements, add mod support on console, stuff like that. But I don't expect Starfield to really change that much. I think it will always be kind of like a fun experiment that just didn't pay off. All of this is just to say, I don't see a scenario where Suicide Squad or mostly Skull and Bones, because Suicide Squad, at least there's still a base level of interest where like this might not be game of the year levels or record-breaking levels of engagement. But if the game is good and Destiny and Division players play it and have a good time, it could get to a decent level of success. You know, this is nothing to scoff at. It's not Baldur's Gate 3 levels of hype and love, but it's still enough to be a successful live service game. So it could be successful. I think Suicide Squad could get there. I think core Rocksteady fans will be disappointed still. I don't think that's going to magically change, but they could get there. But with Skull and Bones, just being dead honest, I don't see how this skyrockets up to the level where it needs to be to recoup hundreds of millions of dollars. Even if it's really, really good, even if it's the pirate simulation game we've all been praying for, which as far as we know right now, it's not, because people have played it in play tests and know that it's not. I don't see this happening. I would love for it to be a good game, but I don't think it's going to be a business success anytime soon. He took my thing.